quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive action?
We're going to have to get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it.
It's very concerning because I think the entire Constitution would be up for grabs.
Philosopher John Locke said, if a government fails to protect the natural rights of its citizens, or if it breaks the social contract, the people are entitled to rebel against the government and create a new one. After remembering this, I recalled that this quote was basically rewritten in some major US document. And after some digging, I realized that it was the Declaration of Independence. The unanimous declaration of the 13 colonies states, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, although this isn't a legal document, this idea and ideology has been ingrained in the American foundation since its birth. So I've been thinking, are there any legitimate ways to dismantle or completely replace the United States government? This question is part of a series that I am doing where I basically answer and research any questions that just pop up into my head. I have a bunch of questions that I basically think of every week, and instead of searching it on Google immediately like one does, I put the questions down in my notes app and I save it for researching and answering at a later date. And now I just want to take all of you on this journey with me of answering all these questions, and hopefully we both can learn something new out of it. So I just want to clarify something, that despite it stating in the Declaration of Independence, the document that literally birthed the nation, that you could overthrow a government, doing this violently is not legal. For instance, on January 6, 2021, when 2,000 people stormed the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. to prevent the certification of the election results, many called this an insurrection, which is a violent uprising against any authority or government, and it is very illegal. But one part of the United States Constitution may provide the means to legally abolish the current state of the Constitution, therefore possibly changing the country as we know it today. This is Article 5 of the Constitution.
My name is Vicki Harrison, and I am the Director of Constitutional Convention and Protecting Dissent Programs at Common Cause. Article 5 is a little wonky because most people don't know what Article 5 is. Article 5, we do know one process in it, which is the amendment process, which allows us to amend our Constitution. And we've obviously done that 27 times. And there's another couple of sentences in Article 5 that also allows for a constitutional convention.
The article sets forth two procedures for amending the Constitution. The first method requires both the House and Senate to propose a constitutional amendment by a vote of 2/3 of the members present. This is how all the current amendments came to be. But the second method, which hasn't been done since 1787, states that Congress can call a convention for proposing amendments upon the request of 2/3, 34, of the state legislators, and then the amendment must be ratified by 3/4 or 38 states. Now, the reason why this method hasn't been done in 237 years is because it is quite difficult to get a supermajority of state legislators to come and submit applications to start a convention. Also, there is a more important reason, which is the possibility of a runaway convention. State delegates might try to add a bunch of different amendments or ratify amendments that can just alter civil liberties such as voting rights, freedom of speech.
We will not be silenced.
Or even overturning two-term limits on presidents.
Our concern with a constitutional convention is that it's just got a couple of sentences in the Constitution. There's no rules. There's nothing. Once we have 34 states call for a convention, Congress should call it, and then it happens. And there's nothing in there to say what is going to happen once we get to a convention. And we don't have any precedent except for our current Constitution, which was, quite frankly, a runaway constitutional convention.
The first and only Constitutional Convention met in Philadelphia between May and September of 1787 to address the problems of the weak central government that existed under the Articles of Confederation. However, there are historians that argue whether or not it was a runaway convention. On one hand, there is an argument that there was a necessity for change, as Articles of Confederation were seen to be inadequate, and the delegates believed a more comprehensive solution was required to address the young nation's challenges. But on the other hand, the delegates actually convened to revise and improve the Articles of Confederation, and instead they completely scratched that and created a whole new constitution.
Franklin was asked by someone, I think, on the streets of Philadelphia shortly after the 1787 convention adjourned, what kind of government the Constitution would give us if it was adopted. And Franklin's famous answer was, a republic, if you can keep it.
A convention was actually almost called in the early 1980s when 32 out of the 34 required states called for a convention. The movement to call for the convention started in the 1970s to impose fiscal discipline on the federal government. However, enthusiasm for adding this amendment waned in response to fears that the convention might not be limited to a one single issue amendment where it might actually create a runaway convention.
Now that we have this process in the Constitution, but no rules, no way for the courts to intervene, no way for Congress to intervene, our concern is, number one, a runaway convention, which is what happened last time. So what's going to happen, and what are they going to take out of our current Constitution? And what are we going to lose?
So why not just add this amendment via Congress the easy way? Well, amendments can be just as difficult to pass through Congress, if not even more difficult.
That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack the physical appearance of another person?
Are your feelings hurt?
Her words down.
Aw.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold on.
Big guy.
Oh, stop it.
Is that your solution, everybody?
One of the amendments that supporters of the convention want to push through is term limits. This one in particular may be difficult to push through Congress because essentially Congress people would be voting on the fate of their own jobs, and I'm sure this won't be overwhelmingly popular. On the opposite end, President-elect Donald Trump floated the idea of a third term, which could happen if state legislators undo the 22nd Amendment.
FDR, 16 years, almost 16 years, he was four-term. I don't know, are we going to be considered three-term or two-term? You tell me. Ronnie, what do you think?
Also, in a recent interview, Trump mentioned that he would kick out the kids of undocumented people who were born in the United States. This would go against birthright citizenship, which is enshrined in the 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive action?
We're going to have to get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it.
According to multiple news outlets, the 118th Congress in 2023 was the most unproductive in decades, with Republicans having only a 5-seat lead in the House of Representatives and an 8-seat lead in the Senate. It may be even more difficult to pass any sort of constitutional amendments through Congress. However, pushing for a convention is actually quite difficult because even if the 34 minimum states come together to actually call for a convention, there needs to be 4 additional states to actually ratify any amendment.
I also have a lot of folks say, well, Vicki, even if they pass something really bad, we still have to have all these states ratify it. And again, people can call me a fearmonger, but there is nothing preventing them from changing that ratification process like they did last time.
One of the biggest supporters of a convention is a group called the Convention of States. They call for amendments that would limit the power of jurisdiction of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints, and place term limits on federal officials. On December 3rd, North Carolina just passed a resolution calling for an Article 5 convention because they want to push for term limits. U.S. Term Limits is another organization behind pushing for new constitutional amendments, and the North Carolina legislature passed the legislation or an application for a convention that was created by the group. The legislation reads, "The legislature of North Carolina hereby makes an application to Congress as provided by Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States of America to call a convention limited to proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America to set a limit on the number of terms that a person may be elected as a member of the United States House of Representatives, and to set a limit on the number of terms that a person may be elected as a member of the United States Senate." Regarding North Carolina's passage of this resolution, U.S. Term Limits President stated, "All of the sponsors and co-sponsors have been an integral part of the victory in North Carolina. Their efforts helped put North Carolina at the forefront of states calling for term limits on Congress." In a report by the Carolina Journal, North Carolina State Senator Todd Johnson, Republican, said lifelong career politicians lead to the gridlock that we have seen in D.C. today. With this resolution, North Carolina would join the other 8 states to do our part to address the issues in D.C. During a debate prior to the vote, Democrat State Senator Greg Meyer stated, "Let's be clear, you are opening the doors to a constitutional convention. This is an insane idea. I will vote against it." Another huge supporter of the Article 5 Constitutional Convention is the Heritage Foundation, and they're behind the controversial Project 2025. In late 2023, the Heritage Foundation issued a report titled "Reconsidering the Wisdom of an Article 5 Convention of the States."
In December 2024, everybody has now heard of Project 2025. And I like to let people know, first of all, the Heritage Foundation, the author of Project 2025, was opposed to a constitutional convention their entire history until last October. They changed their minds. So that is very concerning because the Convention of States has let us know what they're going to do if they have a convention. You know, the balanced budget plus completely restructuring Congress. And while this is not a Republican or Democrat-led opposition or push, these two particular ones, the balanced budget amendment and Convention of States, which are so close, are very much Republican-led. And currently, we have 27 state legislatures that are controlled by Republicans and 17 by Democrats. And I just tell people, do you think that we're going to get to a convention and suddenly the states that have been passing policy against the environment, against all sorts of things? So I tell people, everybody's kind of freaking out because they're like, oh my gosh, what do you mean get rid of the Department of Education? We've started to hear that out of Project 2025. Ben, that's been one of the things that Convention of States has been saying for years. Get rid of the Environment Department. Let's give all federal land back to the states, which would devastate. As someone who lives out west, I would live in an oil field if they did that. These guys at the Convention of States and at ALEC, they have mock conventions. And last year they put out just a slew of anti-environment amendments. And then when you look at Project 2025, you can see the same things all the way down. And it's very concerning because I think the entire Constitution would be up for grabs.
Currently, there are 9 state legislatures that have passed the U.S. term limit single subject application for congressional term limits. In total, 28 states passed a resolution calling for a convention, and only 6 more are needed for a convention to actually occur.
They have to get 6 more states. They need 6 more states, and I'm sure they've got their target. And, we've already seen that they are now going to be going after blue states because their reasoning is with the new president and Congress and the Senate, maybe there's some Democrats that are going to feel like this is the only way to get it done. And so while Democrats do not support typically the BBA and Convention of States, it's something that we're having to address on both sides of the aisle. And again, as I said earlier, there's no universal opposition and there's really no universal support. You have some on either. So I feel like I don't see them getting to a convention in the next year or two, but I'm going to continually try to rescind. I don't like that 28 number. I would like to get that back down. I don't like Convention of States at 19. I'd like to rescind some of those.
In a 2022 paper by law professor William A. Woodruff, he pointed out that James Madison, who introduced a list of amendments to the Constitution on June 8, 1789, which later became the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, was opposed to another Article 5 Constitutional Convention to consider these amendments. When asked whether a convention should be called to consider a Bill of Rights, Madison said, "Having witnessed the difficulties and dangers experienced by the first convention which assembled under every propitious circumstance, I should tremble for the result of a second." Woodruff said Madison's concerns of a convention revealed concerns that neither state legislators nor constitutional resolutions could really control the scope of proceedings of a convention if a convention were to convene. The delegates themselves would be the ultimate authority.
There's no guardrails, no rules, and who's going to be at a constitutional convention? How are the delegates going to be chosen? Who are the delegates going to be? Are we going to have 2 per state, like senators? So California doesn't have the same voice as residents in Montana. I mean, these are our civil liberties, and who are the delegates? We already have a couple of states that, are passing bills saying these are the delegates that we're going to send. We also have states that, they're passing bills saying, if a delegate goes off the rails, if a delegate does X, Y, or Z that they weren't sent there for, then we're going to fine them or they could face jail time. Because they're trying to alleviate our concerns around a runaway convention. To that, I say ridiculousness. I mean, the Constitution's already rewritten at that point. Who cares if some guy has to pay a $500 fine? Why would you set your house on fire and then pray the fire department shows up in time?
So, to answer my question, yes, the states have ultimate power to basically dismantle the United States government by changing the supreme law of the land, aka the United States Constitution. After all, you can't have United States government without the United States Constitution. It is, however, let me reiterate, very illegal to replace the United States government through any violent attacks, violent means, violent methods, any of that. But overthrowing the United States Constitution can be completely legal through an Article 5 convention. Therefore, if a convention were to happen, who knows what the fate of that sacred document can be. If the United States Constitution is fundamentally changed, then who's to say that our country won't also be fundamentally changed?
I always ask, well, what can I do? I never even heard of this before, and now I'm horrified, so what can I do? And again, rescind or defend. And what I tell people, Ben, what is needed more than anything is for citizens to talk to their state legislators, talk to your state senator, talk to your state representative, because they don't know about it either. They are maybe newly elected and they get to caucus and that's the first time they've heard about it. They don't really know. So is it, so if the leader, or if, let's say, a powerful chairperson of a committee they need supports it, they're just going to support it because they don't know any better. And so I tell everybody in every single state, you have a great job you could do about this. You could really get involved. And of course, I tell anybody, reach out to me, send me an email. Let's have a conversation. Let's do some strategizing. Let's see how we can educate people about this and also prevent a constitutional crisis.
I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all learned something new. I know I have. If you have any questions or any thoughts about this topic, please feel free to leave them down below. I will see you guys next time when I have another random question that I want to answer. Bye.